Ah, yes, this story. Oh, this story has some good stuff. You know, in conjunction with the Stop Being So Stupid series, I could make another one called Women Ruin Everything. In this case, gaming journalism. Because this story, aside from being informative, it is also really, really funny. Chinese media black myth Wukong refused to be extorted $7 million by Sweet Baby. So, Chinese company is making a game and gives the West the middle finger because it refuses to become cringe and gay. To give it TLDR. English, the reason why the team behind Black Myth Wukong has been subjected to persistent sexist attacks and slander since the first promotional video is because they have consistently refused political correctness guidance and rejected the extortionate guidance fees of millions of dollars demanded by these political correctness teams. Actually, such teams are quite common in Europe and America. Don't remind us, mate. They interfere with works like Assassin's Creed, Dying Light 2 Stay Human, and God of War by pushing for politically correct female protagonists. These changes are the direct result of interference and guidance of such teams. Game science teams refuse to communicate with these groups and reject their interference. Most importantly, they refuse to pay the exorbitant $7 million in guidance fees. This is the direct reason why they are being attacked and slandered. Some justifications are based on the team's lack of diversity or representation, which doesn't align with the political correctness standards. A typical example is an article by a major IGN writer criticizing Hogwarts Legacy and refusing to evaluate or promote it due to its alleged lack of political correctness. My god, it's a Gamergate fiasco all over again, isn't it? The Chinese media accurately representing the story, and the West looks like a bunch of pricks. Man, we really are living in the Twilight Zone, aren't we? The Chinese Post implies that the backlash the game is receiving in Western media is a direct result of their alleged refusal to contract with companies such as Sweet Baby Inc., which is also mentioned by name. For context, the developer Game Science has been criticized for comments made by higher-ups in the company, which includes co-founder Feng Ji, who reportedly compared game development to pregnancy and said that men and women's biological differences influences their decisions when playing and buying games. True. Now, some demented whack job at IGN, actually let me rephrase that, one of the demented whack jobs at IGN wrote this rather lengthy piece that amounts to the ramblings of a mental patient with far too much time on their hands as they lick the rainbow-colored windows of a padded cell room. But before we get into even the piece here, you guys gotta see this because, my good god, this is so funny. How Black Myth Wukong developers' history of sexism is complicating its journey to the West.
No, nobody, none.
Written by one Rebecca Valentine. That is a rather, Hebrew way of spelling Rebecca, wouldn't you say? Man, if you guys are falling for this hook, line, and sinker, I would be amazed because it's very on the nose. Anyway, moving on. Reb currently lives in the Bay Area with her partner and 2 cats that she brought with her from Kansas City. You are likely a gay, female leftist living in San Francisco with 2 cats as you write about sexism in gaming. This couldn't be any more cliched if you tried. But to get back to the article, now I'm not going to read the whole thing because I don't hate myself all that much, besides it'll ruin my whiskey buzz, so I'll just read some of this, right? For an indie studio that has only released mobile titles within the country, this widespread acclaim of a Black Myth Wukong is a largely unprecedented feat, particularly for a game that has not been released yet. But beneath the luster of the Souls-like is a studio plagued by claims of sexism. Care to provide proof of this claim? No, of course not. You're only a journalist. Several posts have surfaced from Chinese social media website Weibo, written by individuals from the studio that contain multiple references to genitalia and sexual innuendos. Again, proof nowhere to be found. These have provoked a backlash among some in the games community, many of whom are women, and because I'm a man with pattern recognition, I failed to give a right's bollock. This was coupled by Recruitment posters by the studio produced in 2015, which featured images and headlines that point to a culture of ingrained sexism in game science, aka people who like to make jokes who aren't in possession of a vagina. IGN spoke to several women familiar with gaming culture, as well as the games and technology industry in China, many of whom requested to be anonymous, of course, for fear of backlash from fans of game science and the broader games community, which of course would be men. And once again, just take our word for it. In the eyes of many female players, game science has a notably negative reputation, said Jen, a Chinese game designer who is now based outside of China. I admire their dedication and work. I had high expectations for their game until I came across their misogynistic remarks around 2021, which was reported in the news. Which has what to do with the production of the game? Who knows? Now, one of the screenshots here is of a social media post of Fengji, one of the co-founders of the game science studio. Naturally, this was used as an attempt to smear the guy. Want to expand the circle and recruit a few more people, but got licked to the point of being unable to get an erection. Now, the context here being, the phrase is a used idiom in the Chinese language, as a colloquial expression used humorously or sarcastically to describe a situation where excessive flattery or sycophancy has an overwhelming and paralyzing effect on someone. The use of such metaphors can be found in informal speech or on social media. But she rambles on, these crude expressions and the culture of sexism, which means it's functional, also seem to extend to the rest of game science as well, even prior to the studio's founding. In a 2014 annual held meeting at Tencent, members of the Azura Online team, some of them being co-founders of game science, produced a video that poked fun at the imagined plight of its team after the game was shut down. In this video, a few male employees were depicted as adult film actors and rapists after they lost their jobs, whereas some of the female staff had to work as nightclub hostesses and footbath attendants. Tencent declined to comment for this piece. I like how this is used as an example of sexism, and in it both sexes are being disparaged. What a fucking idiot! And a year later, in 2015, Game Science also published several recruitment posters that featured suggestive images which IGN has seen and verified, but for some reason does not have enough faith in or recollection to link in this cheap smearing hit piece disguised as a piece of journalism. In one poster, a risque illustration that resembles the artwork of Austrian artist Egon Schiele is accompanied by a header that says, "Mandatory self-pleasure." In another poster that featured the rear view of a woman, the ad reads, "Don't screw your colleagues." In the same ad, "Friends with benefits" were also implied as an office perk. If you can't tell that's a joke because they're contradictory, I'm just going to assume you suck and you have no sense of humor. And the third poster featuring a dumbbell is far more pointed, with the ad saying that fatties should fuck off. I hope that translation is at least accurate. Then we have this one. The snake spirit is different from what I imagined, but if I cover the bottom half with my hand, it's still possible to jerk off, which is also incorrect calculation. The correct one would be, it's not what I expect, but it's not impossible to cover the bottom half of the body with your hand. It's not impossible. Incompetence or deliberately pushing propaganda. I will let you guys decide. But if we scroll down further, a growing women's movement. Can I just remind you people, this story was about a game's supposed complicated sexist journey into the West, as this psychopath is writing about feminism in China as we are trying to purge leftism and we are actively looking for a sense of traditionalism in the West. No. Sexism in a game is somehow complicating its journey westward. I don't even need a punchline for this absurdity. I can just describe the shit show as it is, and that suffices. Oh, and by the way, regardless of whatever struggles there are between men and women in any given society, the last people on earth you want to have in your corner advocating for women's anything are Western feminists, who are by all accounts, batshit insane. While China as a whole is currently seeing a growing feminist revolution, because the last time China tried revolution, it turned out really, really well. Women are fighting an ongoing uphill battle against what multiple Chinese game developers have told IGN is an historic prevailing culture of women being thought of, spoken of, and treated as sexual objects inferior to men. Very base, by the way. Whereas in the West, they are openly perpetuating this perspective as they go on OnlyFans. Speaking to IGN, Chinese game developer Monica F. names numerous reasons for China's feminist struggles, including the lingering impacts of China's one-child policy, also revolutionary by the way, resulting in an overall gender imbalance in China and a growing population of frustrated adult men. Isn't it amazing? In the West, abortion and the right to choose is praised as, I am woman, hear me roar, all of that bollocks, right? But the moment the state does the opposite, it's how dare you hamper my gift of womanhood. It's such a bunch of cringe. It always comes down to how can I turn this into something I can bitch about? Another issue, she says, is a broader government hostility towards feminist ideals. Oh, I wonder why there is such hostility to that. What a mystery that one is. Making it difficult for discussions to gain traction on the walled-off, heavily censored Chinese internet. current Chinese President Xi Jinping has been particularly strict. He oversaw the detention of the Feminist Five alongside a wave of crackdowns against women's rights organizations and feminist online speech, including the censorship of the Me Too and Me Too in China hashtag during the heyday of the online movement. And while this piece explicitly focuses on women, it's critical to note that China's community of non-binary— shut up, none of that stuff is real. Now, if you click on that link there about the Feminist Five, you will find an article of about 5 years ago mentioning one of the five, nicknamed Maisie. Listen to this. After the NGO where she used to work, Beijing Yerinping, was forced to cease activities, Maisie turned to rainbow hippie rights and founded the Rainbow Legal Hotline, an organization that provides legal assistance to members of the Skittle Squad community. In the second half of 2017, Maisie went to England to study in the Human Rights Master's Program at the University of Sussex. After completing her studies at the end of 2018, Maisie returned to her hometown, Beijing. In an article posted on February 16 on her WeChat public account, Lee Maisie, who occupied men's bathroom, Maisie wrote, "The reason I decided without hesitation to return to China is simple. There is no escape. We live in a time when every day we can be disgusted by Trump." Trump. You went to Sussex in England and you came back with a hatred of Donald Trump, the American president. As a feminist activist, as a gay rights activist, oh, piss off. You're a tourist who got indoctrinated. These are not serious people. These are unimpressive midwits. Talk about susceptible to propaganda. You went from one regime's propaganda to another regime's propaganda and then returned to China with said propaganda. You are what we would call a useful idiot. And then they're surprised that the state is heavy-handed and censored. I can't imagine why that might be the case. Half of this damn article is devoted to feminism in China, written by some delusional wanker living in San Francisco, using translations that are a pile of arse for a gaming website. These people are all mentally unstable. There's no two ways about it. Feminist organization in China has been very uphill in many senses of the word, said Rui Zong, a board member of Chinese feminist editorial collective New Voices and a China research specialist. There's been crackdowns after labor organizing efforts, well done. There's been definitely crackdowns after people have accused prominent Chinese men of harassment, assault, or sexual misconduct, and the deck has been generally very stacked against them. Hey, question for you tots. Did the Me Too movement have a healthy effect on male and female relations in the West? No. So why the hell do you think this is going to work in China? In case this isn't massively obvious by now, this is nothing more than a bullshit ruse to gain political power. 'Tis a Trojan horse. In gaming communities, these struggles are echoed and exacerbated. While a 2020 Nico Partners reports identifies nearly half of the country's gamers as women, that's a bunch of bollocks by the way, Monica F. explains that online gaming rhetoric especially is toxic and frequently sexist in China, making it hard for women to feel safe. Didn't I call this bloody ages ago? Biology dictates the main thing women want to feel first and foremost is safety. This is why every bloody industry that women shove their ovaries in has all the fun removed in the name of being less toxic. This is why every space that sees an influx of women, it starts to suck because women always make everything about themselves. I will keep saying this over and over again. If you try to understand women via politics, you will think they're idiots. If you try and understand them via the nature of their own sex, you will know they're idiots because they keep pushing the same destructive stupidity that is their nature everywhere they go. I'm not even trying to be mean here. I'm trying to save you ignorant bastards from yourselves. The fact of the matter is this. If you are put in any position that garners a lot of eyeballs, and what you're seen to be doing in these positions is damn near always bad, people will associate you with incompetence and inadequacy. That is basic pattern recognition. Zong too noted that while Chinese online spaces in particular can be extremely hostile towards women, in many ways these spaces aren't that different from other online communities around the world. Case in point, it's almost like men and women have a nature, and women are not suited for ever wielding power. It's like we can't see patterns and learn from history. Before the emergence of female-oriented games, all female players could play online games that were mainly focused on men, Tan says. After the emergence of female-oriented games, Not only girls who play games discovered that there are games specially made for women, but more girls also discovered that games can also be fun. This expands the gaming population and brings further prosperity to the gaming market. And what exactly does this have to do with male-orientated games? Just make the female-orientated games and shut the hell up! We don't bother you about your stupid games. Now, would you kindly leave our pleasant toxic male spaces alone now that you have your own female titles? Or does that upset you because it leaves you with less things to bitch about? But even with the recent recognition of women as a visible gaming market in China, their inclusion in the industry itself is an uphill battle. At best, Zong suggests women in tech and gaming in China are often invisible. She pointed out that while there are small handfuls of prominent Chinese women in tech, names I'm not even going to try and bother to pronounce, almost all major figures are men. Dear God, these people are missing so many brain cells. I'm surprised they can breathe without an instruction manual. Just because there are apparently more female consumers of a product does not mean you'll have a surge of talented females or desire from them to make the product. Explain to me the logic of thinking those things are somehow correlated. There are fewer women who take an interest in games. It is a male-dominated industry. Of course they're going to look invisible. There's less of you because women care less. That's not sexism. That's a simple manifestation of interest. I'm actually going to read the next part in full because I want to discuss this bit. And with financial and decision-making power primarily held by men, as it should be and should remain that way, many of these tech companies have permitted work environments toxic to women to thrive. Well done. The games industry, we are told, has similar issues. One anonymous developer showed IGN screenshots of a games industry group chat they were in, which included numerous casually sexist remarks and inappropriate nicknames, otherwise known as banter if you don't have a sex toy shoved up your ass. They told us they were in multiple such chats, billed as networking or chat groups for industry talk, but which often devolved into discussions that they called very unsettling. One example of this manifesting that we were pointed to was from the company Duoyi Games, developer of Gunfire Reborn. At one point, its CEO Zhu Bo laid off 11 female employees as part of an internal investigation, with one anonymous employee alleging that Zhu Bo shared in a board meeting that he did so because he didn't want another feminist bitch in the company. And what a chat he is for doing that, by the way. However, despite this effort, Duoyi Games has suffered little to no blowback. That might be because you're lying, but the fact that you're surprised by that speaks volumes. You're literally writing an article bitching about men having too much power and influence in China, and when a bunch of women get fired, you seem surprised when no one gives a shit. These people are dumb. They're simply stupid, inadequate human beings. Gunfire Reborn, its most recent release, sold 2 million copies on PC alone and subsequently released ports on Xbox and PlayStation consoles, with a Nintendo Switch version on the way. Duoyi Games did not return IGN's request for comment, and multiple developers we spoke to were familiar with the story around a game called Retirement Simulator. The game was criticized at its early access launch last year by a number of women for a certain character's appearance coming across as over-sexualized. Who the hell cares? You're not going to be the one buying the game. Developer Doublethink Studio, that's a very adequate name by the way, made adjustments to the character as well as other changes in response, only to be hit with a massive backlash from another segment of its audience for supposedly pandering to a feminist audience. That's not supposedly, that is definitely pandering to the cringe fringe. Even today, the game's Steam reviews are mostly negative, with many negative reviews seeming to refer to the change. Careless removal of content, change of artwork, or so that the simp developer of the game can suck up and please some extreme feminists. Read one review from last May. Would not recommend for anyone with more than a single brain cell. Now, with all of that being said, let me end this video with something a tad contentious, and this will only be for those of you that can handle something heavy and remain nuanced. When it comes to feminists and feminism, the former are useless idiots who have nothing to add to civilization, and they will gravitate towards whatever fairy tales that makes them feel better about the fact that they suck and they're losers. The ideology is a cancerously destructive parasite. Everywhere you find an influx of women in anything in conjunction with this ideology, it hemorrhages prestige, money, and popularity across the board. If you look at this article, and it's indicative of the ideology in the West in general, there is no talk anywhere of function. No, it's simply, we must have women because this will somehow combat sexism. Sexism in their world is simply women aren't in positions of authority. Why is that bad, and why does that need to change? No answer, because they simply want power for the sake of having power. What are your duties, your responsibilities, your accountability with power? What are your intentions with said power? What makes you think your intentions are noble or even desired or even possible? What is the consequence of you holding power? That conversation is never had anywhere. If you can't answer these questions, I see absolutely no reason to listen to any women on any matters of authority or politics. I will flat out reject anything they have to say, period. Which brings me to the CCP. Now, before people lose their tiny minds, I'm not endorsing everything the CCP has done. However, SBI is an entity funded by the Canadian state, and considering the tight control the CCP has on its markets, I'd say we're looking at a fairly level playing field here. It's bad versus the better option. And yes, I know free market, consumer choice, blah, 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 all of that cliched nonsense. We're not dealing with a perfect utopian world here. Live and work in the real world, not the fictional world of your idealism. Now, I believe the one function of the state is defense, and that can go under a myriad of headings, all things considered. However, considering the ideological virus that comes with interacting with the likes of SBI, if the nation state wishes to weaponize its power and purge and gatekeep their nation from these infectious tentacles, I will fully endorse the state going full dong-zo and give credit where credit is due for annoying a legion of Western losers. Absolutely based. If you can make regular people endorse an entity like the CCP over a Western democratic state, I can think of no greater humiliation and indication of the failure that is your ideology than that one. Don't think of it in terms of the state. Think of it in terms of a competing power block. Because the markets aren't free either, let's be real. Investors rule the markets. And if there happens to be an ideological infection, as is the case now, and someone wishes to use a competing power block, in this case something state adjacent, and does so in defiance, it's simply one power block versus another. Without a national flavor, without a preservation of a theme, what you will ultimately end up with is just globalist corporate slop, generic mass-manufactured blandness. Strip all of that away, it boils down to which group uses their resources more effectively and what power is backing it for what cause and what stated goal. Personally, I rather like the idea of a state entity potentially making something cool. I have no loyalty to market consumption because that's simply demotic. I want to shatter this delusion that only the market can create something good. That's rubbish. The state doesn't produce anything by itself. It hires people, the same way the market does. The prime variable of the market is profit via consumption. So the success of a product isn't necessarily quality, it's merely the demotic volume of consumption, i.e. popularity. Taylor Swift is popular, she isn't objectively good by any means. I see no reason why the state can't hire those same entities for projects the exact same way the market does. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.